The philosophy I hold isn't a dreamy, world-negating illusion, nor is it a crude, sense-driven humanism. For me, the only doctrine worth considering is the divinity of the universe, the immortality of the human soul, and the unity of creation with the Absolute. As the all-pervading Brahman manifests in diverse forms across all planes, one must first honor these lower manifestations before ascending to the higher. Sound health, clear understanding, deep knowledge, a pure and powerful will, and moral integrity are all essential for realizing humanity's ideal. My philosophy of life involves adjusting, adapting, and accommodating, seeing good in everything, and effectively using all principles of nature in the journey towards self-realization. This journey requires an integrated adjustment of human powers and faculties. To me, philosophy isn't just a love of wisdom, but its actual possession. In my writings, I've outlined methods for overcoming and mastering the physical, intellectual, mental, and vital layers of consciousness to progress in the spiritual discipline for self-perfection. My creed is to behold the Lord in every being and form, to feel Him everywhere, at all times, and in all conditions of life, to see, hear, taste, and feel everything as God. It is to live in God, melt in God, and dissolve in God. By dwelling in such union, my creed, if you can call it one, is to utilize hands, mind, senses, and body in the service of humanity. Sing the names of the Lord. Elevate devotees. Give instructions to sincere aspirants. Disseminate knowledge throughout the world. I aspire to be a cosmic friend and benefactor, a friend to the poor, the forlorn, the helpless, and the fallen. It is my sacred creed to serve the sick, to nurse them with care, sympathy, and love, to cheer up the depressed, to infuse power and joy in all, to feel oneness with everyone, and to treat all with equal vision. In my highest creed, there are no distinctions, neither peasants nor kings, beggars nor emperors, males nor females, teachers nor students. I love to live, move, and have my being in this indescribable realm. The first step is often the most challenging, but once taken, the rest becomes easy. People need more courage and patience. They often shy away, hesitate, and are frightened, all due to ignorance of their true duty. A certain level of education and culture is necessary for a clear understanding of one's place in the world. Our educational system needs a complete overhaul, as it currently skims the surface without reaching the depths of human potential. Achieving this requires cooperation not only from society but also from the government. Success is difficult without mutual help. The head and heart should go hand in hand, and the ideal and the reality should have a close relation. To work with this knowledge is karma yoga. The Lord has declared this truth in the Bhagavad Gita. I pray that this supreme ideal be actualized in the daily life of every individual. I pray that there be heaven on earth. This is not merely a wish, this is a possibility and a fact that cannot be gainsaid. It is to be realized if life is to mean what it ought to mean. Introduction. When I received the set of manuscripts bearing the title Autobiography of Swami Sivananda, I jumped with joy because I expected, as I believe many would expect, that there was a chance to know many of the details of the Master's life which, in spite of my fairly long stay with him, running into many years, I was unable to learn, either from him or from anyone else. But how great was my surprise, not to say disappointment, when I found that I could not obtain even a glimpse of what my little mind was curious to know. Yet, after laying down the manuscripts and thinking about the matter for a while in the manner in which he has trained me to think, I realized the wisdom of his reticence. The one trait which is totally absent in him, and which he completely dislikes in anyone, is idle curiosity and profitless talk. Sage Tiruvalluvar, who is justly regarded in the Tamil country as not merely a poet but also a lawgiver, has in his immortal poem, Tirukural, devoted chapter 20 in Ilaraviar, Rules about Householder's Life, a section of Arathupal, Dharma or Code of Conduct, to what is called Payanila Salamai, which means non-utterance of what is fruitless. The truths which that poet expounds in the 10 stanzas of that chapter are of inestimable value. The 8th stanza says, "The wise who are competent to distinguish between what is useful and what is not will never give utterance to futile words." Sivananda's studied reticence. Swami Sivananda adopts this rule of conduct in his life and never, even in forgetfulness, swerves from it. He considers it wasteful to write about such incidents in his life as are not directly beneficial for the spiritual progress of the reader. That is the reason why we do not hear a word about why he left the shores of India and went to far-off Malaya in those days when orthodox Brahmin families regarded it as sacrilege to cross the seas. It is well known that Sivananda came from one of the most orthodox Brahmin families. Again, what special circumstance made him give up a fairly lucrative job in Malaya and come back to our land bent upon pursuing the life of a sannyasin? There are not a few disciples and admirers of his who wish to know whether he was a householder at any time and what happened to his family if he had one. Even the least curious among those who have the highest regard for his spiritual eminence are eager to know what he did in the Himalayas by way of tapasya, austerity, and sadhana, spiritual practices of the conventional type which is generally undertaken by a novice, for it is their opinion that the pinnacle of spiritual excellence that he has reached is impossible of attainment without arduous and unremitting effort in the right direction. Even these earnest seekers are denied by our Gurudev the pleasure of knowing what he did to make himself the Superman that he is. It is undeniable that his studied reticence regarding these particulars is not due to any shyness in his nature, for where he speaks about himself he exercises no restraint upon his expressions. Perhaps it is the other way. He often says things with an unparalleled boldness, unconcerned about the possibility of being regarded as boastful of his achievements. No, it is not shyness that has stood in the way. It is only his conviction that no useful purpose can be served by writing about them. For instance, regarding the reason that prompted him to go to Malaya, suppose it was merely a spirit of adventure, a desire to see far-off lands, how are we as spiritual aspirants going to benefit by this knowledge? Suppose it was a feeling that he should serve the cause of the unfortunate Indian laborers who were in those days being practically decoyed by estate agents and their minions with promises of high wages and comfortable living but were actually subjected to considerable hardship. Even then, this knowledge will not help us to evolve into spiritual personalities. Knowing that a mention of this phase of his life will not prove useful to us, the author of this autobiography has not spoken a word about it. Again, if there was a special circumstance which produced a radical change in his outlook upon life and made him eager to rush forth in all haste to become a sannyasin, it is not necessary that everyone who has the urge to renounce the world should have the same experience that Sivananda had. When there is the irresistible divine call, anyone will be drawn automatically. Thus no useful purpose is served in mentioning the reason why the author renounced the world. Clues to Sivananda's sadhana. The same is the answer to the other questions, including the sadhana that he must have adopted. What one has to remember is that though books are written, and Swami Sivananda has also written many such treatises, about sadhana with the object of instructing spiritual aspirants, the sadhana which will be really effective, will be purely subjective and will relate to the particular individual himself and not to any other. All sadhana is intended to make one's mind most helpful and least harmful. One's mind is one's own and not of anyone else. It reflects the consequences of one's actions in the past lives and in the present life. Each mind has to be handled in a special way and only the possessor of the particular mind will know from experience and practice that special way. Therefore, even if Swami Sivananda wrote elaborately about what obstacles he had to face in exercising control over his mind and how he faced them, it would be merely a bit of personal history and not anything which would help us in any way, however eager we may be to profit therefrom. Yet, one cannot say that Sivananda has been completely silent in this matter. In the course of the autobiography, he has given us sufficient information here and there. He says, "The life of a mendicant during pilgrimages helped me to develop in a great measure forbearance, equal vision, and a balanced mind in pleasure and pain. I met many Mahatmas and learnt wonderful lessons. On some days I had to go without food and walk mile after mile. With a smile I faced all hardships." Surely this is a very brief account. But it is highly revelatory. It is not easy to walk mile after mile on an empty stomach and still preserve equanimity of temper. That is real sadhana. It elevates the individual more than 100 malas of japa sitting in a cozy corner without the pinchings of hunger. One can from such passages of the author understand the nature of the severe austerity that he must have undergone. In another place he writes, "Self-realization is a transcendental experience. You can march on the spiritual path only by placing implicit faith in the words of the sages who have realized the truth and have knowledge of the self." These words are written in connection with his search for a guru. Here we have an insight into the nature of his faith. It is by no means the faith of an ignorant person. He knew all the teachings about the self that are in the Upanishads. Yet he fully recognized the need of a guru. He knew that unless implicit faith is placed in the words of a guru, the ego cannot be curbed. He teaches us this truth when he writes about his search for a guru. It is in this fashion that we have to learn about the sadhana that he practiced. The fact is that Swami Sivananda is a very practical person. What he learned from books or men would be put into practice so that he might know how far the teaching suited him. If it did not suit him, he would not condemn it but merely shelve it. So far as he was concerned, it was ineffective. That was all. So, whatever he writes about is experienced by him. He does not like torturing the body with the desire to attain spiritual powers and perform miracles. He writes about this too in this book. Motive of the autobiography. Sometimes a doubt arises in me as to whether a saint should write an autobiography at all. Is there not, I ask myself, a tinge of vanity in writing about oneself and one's achievements? It may be pardonable for a worldly man to speak about himself in such a way as to obtain the good opinion of others. But is it right for a self-denying saint to do the same thing? In answering this question, I find that Swami Sivananda is without any blame whatsoever because his book is only in name an autobiography. It does not contain anything which can be construed to have the motive of obtaining the respect and good opinion of the readers. He has had only one motive. He knows that he did not plan anything. God had made him found the Divine Life Society, establish the Forest University, now known as Forest Academy, and do similar things, all of which are at present satisfying the crying need of people all over the world, to live a life without fear and with faith in the protection of the Lord. He finds that whether he wanted it or not, he is at the head of a great mission, and, before he leaves the world, he would like to make people know how this noble movement can be used for the benefit of mankind. That is the main purpose, as I understand it, of his publishing this book with the title Autobiography of Swami Sivananda. Naturally, the book cannot be compared with autobiographies of others which sprang from different motives.